What's going on, everyone? This is Hazy Space Ranger Studios. Blaine coming at ya. It has been a hot summer here in Chicago, so I got to thinking, what better way than to cool down than with some icy miniature bases? So today we're going to be making 3 different types of icy miniature bases. Going to walk you through how to do these. So grab those aprons and let's get painting. Great, so before we start basing, let's go ahead and take one of our bases out of the 3 and start laying down some corkboard on it. This is going to be our Mountainous base. We're going to touch it later in the video, but we want to put our corkboard down to kind of build a general platform for the mountains before we actually start basing them. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm laying down the cork in large chunks to kind of create the foundation of our mountain. Using some super glue here, I'm going to put the bigger pieces down first. Once those are in place, I'm going to start breaking apart some corkboard to create some small rocks. The purpose of these are to fill in the gaps where we haven't filled in things. So you can see there's some black still left on the base. Want to fill in those spaces and then also build up our mountains as well. You'll notice I'm laying down a lot of super glue, and that's okay because I'm going to come back through and dry brush these things. I want to make sure that the corkboard is secure before I start going at them a little bit aggressively with a dry brush. Here I am laying down that super glue pretty aggressively there. Gonna let all that dry before we start basing. So now we got our primer here. It's gonna be that Vallejo airbrush primer, busting out the harder Steinbeck Evolution brush. Just gonna be laying down that Vallejo black primer so we have something for our paint to stick to on all 3 of our different brushes here. You'll notice that that Mountainous base we just started building up, laying down some black primer on top of all of that corkboard as well. Sweet, so let's focus on our deep ocean base first. We have a triad of blues here. Start off with that McCrag blue, then our Teclis blue as our mid-tone, and then we have Temple Guard blue as our highlight. We're gonna be taking all of these colors and laying them down onto our wet palette. The goal here is to have them in easy access. That's gonna be super important for our approach to this particular base because we're gonna be doing some wet blending, and you'll see what I mean by that here in a moment. So I have all these colors right here next to each other. You can see that Temple Guard blue didn't turn out exactly how I wanted it to. It wasn't mixed up properly. So I just busted out a silicone spatula and I'm just kind of mixing it up on the palette. Grabbing my Army Painter Regiment brush, we're gonna start laying down that deepest tone. So that was our McCrag blue here. You can see I'm putting it near the center. The idea here is to replicate a deep ocean trench that has frozen over. So I'm kind of creating that ocean trench there in the center with the black and laying the McCrag blue next to it. I am keeping my brush very wet here, and I am making sure I'm working fast. I want the colors of the paint to blend together, and I want the water inside of my brush to kind of facilitate that process as well. So you can see I'm going back and forth between those deep tones, those mid tones, and then those highlights. And particularly, I'm focusing on those edges where those colors are meeting each other. You want to kind of spend some time blending those together a little bit. It's okay if they kind of take on a little bit of a tie-dye effect because it is ice. It's a moving water that has kind of frozen together. Here, I'm kind of putting in some of that McCrag blue in the center. It was something I was playing with. I'm going to come back and fix that. I noticed that I think that the black in the center works better. So you'll see I come in with that color here in a moment, but continuing to mix those colors in the center. Here I am taking out that twothincoats Doom Death Black, bringing that back into the center, and I'm continuing that process of making sure I'm mixing those colors near the edges here. You'll notice that the surface is still shiny. I'm working really fast here while things are still wet, keeping my brush wet as well, keeping the paint wet, and just mixing things right there at those edges to create a smooth gradient amongst the colors. Once again, carrying on with that deep oceanic frozen base, we're gonna bust out our nitrile gloves here because now we wanna create that frozen layer. And to do that, we're gonna need some UV resin. And UV resin is gonna be a common theme throughout all of these bases. If it's something you don't have, it's really easy to snag off of Amazon cheap. You're gonna need a UV light as well. We're gonna cover the entire base with this stuff, and luckily this thing has a little bit of tension to it, so it's gonna hold itself on that base as long as you don't over pour it a little bit. Once again, these nitrile gloves are really important. UV resin is a little toxic, so it's important that you wear a respirator, and it's important that you wear some PPE with the nitrile gloves. Once you've got it all laid on there, you're going to take that UV light and start glowing it onto the base here. That's going to cause this UV resin to cure and harden. All right, sweet. Once we've gotten that to cure, it's going to create this beautiful glossy effect on top of that frozen oceanic base that we worked on. Next thing we want to do is that when you're walking on ice, you're actually creating micro scrapes in it. So we're going to take our X-Acto knife and start to create little fractures inside of the ice as well, just to simulate areas where folks have kind of come through and they've walked across this. Our soldiers are marching on this battlefield, and we want to make sure it looks like that. Great, so once all that's done, we're just gonna snag some Citadel Valhallan Blizzard, and we're gonna grab an old paintbrush as well, and we're gonna start plopping some of this paint on there. We can be a little sporadic with it. You're gonna notice I'm focusing on the edges of the base as well, and the reason I'm doing that is to create a little bit of a composition where we're focusing on the miniature that's gonna be placed in the center. So we're gonna leave that center area kind of open from the snow, but make sure that we have some areas near the outside edge where the snow has actually started to lay down a little bit. Great, and believe it or not, we're already pretty much done with our oceanic frozen over base here with the deep trench underneath. We're gonna come back through later and rim it, but first of all, we have the next base we're working on, which is gonna be a frozen lake. We're gonna focus on the technical paint here, Iron Earth from Citadel. We're gonna lay this down in a little section over here on our second base. We don't want it to take up the entire base, but kind of create an organic shape. You can create a tiny little part of the base that has this, or half of the base for what I'm going with here. Yes, this does not look like the tundra, nor does it look like ice right now, but we're gonna come back through and fix that later on, so don't worry. I'm kind of laying this down in thick globs too, and you can see as this paint dries, what it's doing is it's actually creating micro cracks in the paint. We want that. It's a great effect that we're gonna exploit later on. Once everything is done drying, we're gonna come back to the airbrush booth here. And we're gonna bust out our Vallejo white surface primer. This is gonna allow us to just color everything up, busting out that harder Steinbeck evolution once again, make sure we got a good airflow with the paint. And we're just gonna prime this thing here. Once again, you're gonna do this in 2 layers, so make sure you're just doing a light layer first, letting that dry, and then coming back in and doing another layer. You can also use a rattle can too for all of the priming as well. If you have a black primer and white primer, those are great. You can do this exactly with that. You don't need the airbrush for this at all. Awesome. Now focus on that same base. We're gonna bust out some Vallejo diorama effects. This is gonna be the snow, grab our metal spatula. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus in the region that we did not lay down that technical Iron Earth paint. What we wanna do is kind of have a split in the base between where snow has laid down and then where ultimately we're gonna create a frozen lake effect. Very different from the frozen ocean effect we did in our first base. This is a basing scheme I've been using for my entire Tau army, and I've loved it. It has worked really well. Great, so once all of that snow effect has dried, we're gonna bust out the Citadel contrast paint, Frostheart, and we're gonna go ahead and just lather that all over the base, both in the areas where we laid down the technical paint and also where we laid down that Vallejo snow effect as well. This is gonna give us the undertone of ice for the entire effect we're going for here. We're gonna come back here in a moment with a white dry brush. You can see I'm focusing on the lake area first. Sometimes it's easy to overdo it with the contrast paint there, so I like to go light there and then go a little bit heavier on the snow Vallejo effect portion of the base that we're working on. You see I'm coming back here and just kind of dolloping near where the two meet and then kind of around the edge just to create a little bit of contrast. All right, here's that dry brushing I was talking about. We're busting out our Two Thin Coats White Star and our trusty Monument Pro Synthetic dry brushing brush. Once again, just want to get a little thin dry brush of white on top of everything here. You'll notice I'm going a little bit lighter at first, and I'm focusing on those snowier portions because I don't want to have too thick of a paint on my brush when I'm going towards the frozen lake effect, which is going to be that Citadel iron earth paint there beneath. So I'm focusing on the snowy portion first, getting it as white as possible, making sure that my dry brush, what I have the paint loaded in that brush, is good. And then once I know that it's at a good enough level, I want to make sure that I'm just going lightly on that lake effect portion here, and you'll see what I mean by that here in a moment. Just gently dry brushing that up, building up those layers of white. You can see that the texture is really starting to pop here as things develop. Sweet. This thing is starting to really develop. All right, bust out those nitro gloves again. We're gonna be working with the UV resin once again. It is a critical piece of all of these different basing schemes. You'll notice I'm focusing on that frozen lake area. So where we lay down that iron earth, we have those cracked effects underneath between the blue and the white, and gonna be laying that UV resin on and curing it so you can see it underneath. Finally, we're gonna get some gamer's grass, frozen grass here. I like to super glue it down near the edges where the frozen lake and then the ground meet each other, kind of like foliage that's sort of forming near where the water once was. I like to use super glue on the gamer's grass as well. I've noticed when I start to play with things that have gamer's grass on them, the adhesive that normally comes on the gamer's grass just isn't strong enough to kind of keep it adhered to the base. So I like to add a little bit of super glue to it too. Great, once that's all done, we're gonna do the exact same thing we did for our oceanic frozen base, and we're gonna come in with our X-Acto knife and kind of slice a little bit, create areas where some folks have walked through and they've been battling and the ice is not pure and perfect anymore. Then to wrap things up, we are gonna get the Citadel Technical Valhalla Blizzard paint out again. We're gonna dabble up our brush with it, an old brush once again. You don't wanna get a new brush with this stuff on it. You'll notice I'm focusing on those areas that have the gamer's grass on them. I want to have like little plollops of snow kind of building up near the tips of those grass. I'm also gonna be pressing it into the base as well, near the areas where the ground texture is, and then kind of adding a little bit of snow on top of the frozen lake as well. And once we're done with this, we can move on to our next base as well. It's gonna be our Mountainous base. Great, so we have that Mountainous base with the corkboard that we've primed up, and we're gonna start dry brushing to build this up. So I have 3 different tones of gray. Dungeonstone gray is gonna be the first one I work with here as my deepest, similar to the triad we worked with on the first base. Just gonna be building up the colors on this guy. Starting off with our deepest tone, Dungeonstone gray from Two Thin Coats. Moving on to our next tone here. And just continuing to build up those colors. You notice I'm a little bit lighter with this next one because I want those deeper tones to kind of show from underneath. And then our lightest tone out of those grays here. I'm gonna be very gentle with this. It's okay at this point if for some reason some of the corkboard is breaking apart and there's a little bit of that natural corkboard color. We're gonna fix that later. Now we're gonna make up some blue snow. I'm gonna take some Liquitex Sicilian blue and then also that Diorama Effects snow effect from Vallejo. And I'm gonna just kind of mix these up in a tiny little jar here. Start very lightly with the ink from Liquitex, the little bit of ink goes a long way here. And so you'll notice I'm only gonna put in a couple of drops, maybe 1 or 2, and then I'm actually gonna start mixing these things together. And that's gonna create a nice blue snow. It's similar to what we're doing with the frost heart, but instead of actually painting down the white first and putting the frost heart on, we're doing everything inside of one step here. So this is how I create a little bit of a blue snow effect. And you'll notice with this Mountainous base, I'm kind of filling in a little bit of gaps where the rocks aren't necessarily meeting. Also where the rocks are flat, I'm coming in and putting some of this effect down as well to kind of simulate where snow has landed on the flat mountainous region. Once again, this is a great time also to cover up some of those areas where the corkboard has sort of broken during the dry brushing, making sure that you're just taking care of some of those earlier mistakes. They're not anything that requires us to restart. Painting is an additive process, and so we can fix those things as we're building the space up. Great, so we have a nice little base here. We're gonna do something similar to what we did with the lake frozen base, and we're gonna bust out the monument dry brush, our old reliable here. And we're gonna have our white star once again. It's gonna be our highlight. And we're gonna go over those blue regions of snow that we've already laid down. And we're gonna gently dry brush this white on top of it. The idea here is just to build up a little bit of differentiation in color between those lighter blues that might surface up from snow when you're looking at it deeper in the pact, and then versus the highlight up top, which is gonna be that white star. Once that's done, we wanna bust out some acetate sheet. The acetate sheet is great. We're gonna be cutting out some tiny little triangles here because what we wanna do is create a little bit of icicles. Once you're way up in these mountains, the water is freezing solid, and so anywhere where there's a little bit of an overhang in the mountain, that's what we want to do, is create some icicles. This is a really difficult step. It takes some patience, but you just want to have some super glue ready to go, some tweezers, and wherever you have an overhang. So you can see I'm starting to gently layer down these icicles. I'm starting from one edge, and I'm just going to work across the entire thing here. It's okay if there's a little bit of overhang as well. I actually find it easier to create the icicles a little longer. So you're actually gluing the icicles in the center of them against the contact point where your overhang is on the mountain. And we're gonna come back in later and we're just actually gonna clip the overhang off where it's extending beyond where the icicle would actually form. And you'll see what I mean by that in a moment. Once all those icicles are down, I'm gonna come back in with some super glue and make sure everything's secure. And here we are starting to clip off a little bit of those overhangs. So you can see where the icicles extend beyond where the flat portion of the rock are. And I'm starting to clip those pieces off. Once that's done, we're gonna bring out the UV resin again. We're gonna let just a little tiny bit drip onto the icicles, and then we're gonna cure those as well. The idea here is just to solidify the form of those icicles and give them a little more volume as well. Once that's done, we have a beautiful base here. We're ready to go ahead and start wrapping up all 3 of our different bases. Of course, before that, we do want to put down some technical Valhalla Blizzard. We've used this on all 3 of our bases. It's a wonderful paint to have if you don't have it. We're just gonna lay this down across the entire base to create more texture across it. Great. Once all that Valhalla Blizzard is down, we're gonna be ready to wrap up all 3 of our bases with something that is critical for making sure that you have a beautiful base at the very end. It is gonna be laying down Doom Death Black across the rim of all of our bases. So you see, I'm gonna do it here on our Oceanic Frozen base first, and then I'll do it to all the others off camera. I like to go through this with 2 layers. So do 1 pass with the Doom Death Black, and then do a second. Once that's done, we want to bust out that oceanic base one more time here. Just in the center where we scratched up a little bit, we'll take some Citadel Ard Coat. This is just a little bit of a gloss coat. We want to kind of put it in the center. This is going to bring back some of that glossiness and that frozen effect. It's going to create a differentiation in the texture between areas that have that gloss effect versus areas that don't. All right, and with that, we have wrapped up 3 different ways to paint icy miniature bases. You've learned a lot of great techniques with these. I would encourage exploring combining them. Do you want to do that deep oceanic ice look along with the rocks as if it's the edge of an ocean that's been frozen over, or perhaps combining some of that blue snow with the frozen lake effect as well? There's all sorts of potential here for you to kind of combine and find things that you enjoy for your army or whatever project you are working on. If you enjoyed this video, I do ask, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps support the channel. Besides that, keep your imagination out there.